everyone, and welcome back to a Tac-Com community podcast. We haven't done one of these in a really long time. So before we get into all the Gears E-Day topics, we'll go ahead and introduce the room. I'm just going in order of who's on my screen in what order. So Neon, you want to kick it off?
Oh, all right, yay. What's going on, Tac-Com? Neon Velocity, been a long time. Semi-regular, I guess you could say at this point on Tac-Com podcast. I think this is the third one I've done, maybe fourth, somewhere around there. Big Gears of War content creator back in the day, during Gears 5, mainly focusing on like PvE, medal guides, achievements, and things of that nature. But coming back into the fold, obviously, the last few months as the rumors were producing and getting more out there that there was something coming. So here we are.
Alrighty. Terry, you want to go ahead?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Terry. I'm the current owner of the PC Discord community, as laughable as that is, being a Discord admin. We currently host Gears 1 PC nights. We're looking to soon host UE PC nights again, if that's to be successful. I also share news about fan projects and mods, such as Delta Online and New Hope. Hopefully, we can share some more news about that in the future.
Alright. Last but not least, Ace.
Hello, yep, I'm Ace McCloud, or sometimes Ace S. McCloud. I'm a moderator for the official Gears of War Discord, the official Twitch channel, previously to that Mixer, and lots of all the other channels as well. I've been I think on a previous podcast with you for Gears 5, I think, and happy to be here and chat about Gears. Thank you.
Essentially, we're the two neckbeards that ban you if you post something in the wrong text channel, so just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I guess I'm that person who does that on Reddit.
Yeah,
true. Neon, what are you banning people from? Come on.
Sir, that's the wrong flair. It's meant to be in the discussion flair, not news. Thank you.
Yeah, so big Gears E-Day announcement. So we might have some new people in this podcast, so I'll just say, hi, I'm Chaps. I've been running the Tac-Com account for a little while, and it actually started as a community stream. It's a place where recently I've been doing more just opinion pieces from myself. In the past I've done some guides, but really the foundation of the channel is around the community and trying to help the community and doing sort of podcast and introduction video type things to get the community to collaborate a little bit. But alright, yeah. E-Day announced a couple days ago. So I think the first thing I had on my list here, let's just talk why back to E-Day. There was a cliffhanger, sort of cliffhanger. Actually, yeah, it's a cliffhanger, almost a literal cliffhanger at the end of Gears 5. There definitely should be a Gears 6 story to continue that. But instead of doing that, they went to E-Day. There's some news articles giving little hints about why that is, but let's just get your opinions. Why back to E-Day? Neon, you want?
Yeah,
I was you look like you're ready. You're just waiting.
Yeah, I was ready. Yeah, I think I'm gonna come at it from a little bit of a different approach. I think that definitely there's gonna be a Gear 6 at some point to wrap up that story because I'm invested in it. I think by 2 games everybody's invested. I don't think they should just cut ties with that and wrap it up in some conclusion of some format, however that might be.
So, but real quick, you say they'll wrap it up with Gear. Do you think they would put out the Gear 6 just to wrap it up, or do you think they would continue like Gear 6 and possibly 7 and continue that story?
Yeah, I think it just depends on what the fan feedback is. I mean, I think that they can develop a Gear 6, but they need to give it time to continue to cook and bake and make sure that they're thoughtful, because I feel like both 4 and 5 have been, in my opinion, I don't want to say I speak for a lot of the majority, but I speak for a few, that it definitely has felt very just stale. Like, it doesn't really lure me in. I think Gears 5 did a better job than Gears 4, but it doesn't feel like year 1 through 3. And I think that's where the majority of the community is kind of aligned, I would say, which is why I think going back to E-Day is the perfect opportunity for the Coalition as a studio to reset, if you will, and say, okay, let's go back and let's actually pay attention to what are our fans saying. What do they like? And obviously, it's it's Marcus and Dom, Baird and Cole, which don't know exactly their appearances, but we know Marcus and Dom are going to be in this game, and I think that's what it's about, is going back and resonating with legacy fans that have already left the game, those that are still around, to give them that fan appreciation, if you will, but also to give probably some new introductions to a lot of new people with all the Game Pass like that they're offering across cloud gaming, PC gaming, you name it, because there's a TV show and things of that being created. So I think the fact that we have all these new opportunities, it's a great time to go back in time and start to understand where does Gears 1 pick up from.
I never really thought of this, but it would be kind of interesting if they wanted to wrap up that Gear 6 story and they just use the TV show. I think that would be a waste of a TV show, but they could use the TV show to just wrap up that story, be like, all right, we're done, we're not going back there.
Yeah, that would be
I can't
crazy.
imagine the show being based around the new trilogy at all. No.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear what Terry and Ace have to think about, though. Like, what are you guys thinking about? I mean, that's kind of what my thoughts are.
You can go ahead, Ace, if you want to.
Yeah, well, we have to remember, I think, equal parts the Coalition Gears, they're also heavily historically tied to the Unreal Engine. So I think when you think to when they took it on board, when they were Black Tusk and they were kind of taking over, they went to the Ultimate Edition to remaster the original, and I think there's quite a lot of similarities with that now. I think there's a new Unreal Engine 5, and again, all eyes to them to sort of really showcase it to the wider industry. And so again, it's probably a case of go with something that's quite familiar, but at the same time is new, because obviously there's with Gears 5 being quite a departure, and again, sort of the next generation kind of thing. It's, as the pendulum often does, it swings back, and they go back to a more familiar time. But at the same time, it's a period that we haven't explored in the video game sense. So I think it's a good amalgamation of both old and new, and at the same time, being able to really show off what the Unreal 5 engine can do, which is a large part of what the Coalition do. So yeah, I think there probably will be quite a few comparisons to the Ultimate Edition and that kind of time frame for the studio. Not necessarily going back to basics, but perhaps going through a cycle again, rather similarly.
Yeah, I think that's a really big point that I want to hit on here in a second. But before I jump to that, Terry, we'll see if you have anything else to add in there.
No, it's just very interesting in a way that they have went back to Gears E-Day, and following from a tweet that Gears Feed posted, which was sort of paraphrasing what Phil Spencer had said during an IGN interview about how like Gears 4 and 5 were another team's story, and they didn't have the same vision for Gears as the same old Coalition. Now, I haven't seen an interview myself. I'm purely going up from what Galfield on Twitter has put on here. Or I guess I should say X these days. But I find it, for me, it's like I've always felt with how Tactics was handled and how parts of the Gears 5 multiplayer character releases was handled. I feel like a large portion of the Coalition really had a affinity towards the Locust and the Locust Sword than they did with the Swarm. And I feel like with how the writing was with Gears 5 in particular as well, there wasn't really much focusing on the Swarm themselves. It was more on the Locust, especially around Act 2. And it comes to the point where we're expanding on the Locust yet again in the second part of the new trilogy, when we really haven't fully explored the Swarm. The Swarm have just been there in the background as the main antagonist. And I feel like the team, as they are now, for whatever reason, be it the change in leadership with, Rod Ferguson leaving and such, they really want to have a tackle on E-Day to really get a feel of where they want to go from there on out when it comes to Gear 6, especially when it comes to tone. And it reminds me of when Ultimate Edition was created, because of course that was made by the Coalition for the team to have a feeling of what a Gears game should be. To me, it feels like they're doing the same thing again in that regard. So it's interesting. It's very interesting to me. I'm not sure how to feel about it, but I will say I'm glad it's E-Day and not Gears 6. And it's weird seeing how everyone else has felt the same.
Yeah, I mean, I I honestly thought that they would do Gear 6 and wrap up that story before going to something new. But Neon, kind of to your point, the community hasn't really been so gung ho about these latest games, and there's seemingly a departure of fans from the franchise, and they may need this to revitalize things. Terry, I thought you made an interesting point there about the studio seeming to really like the classic Gears and the Locust. I never really thought about the fact that Gears 5, it really did dive deeper into the Locust aspect than the Swarm. Even though you were fighting the Swarm, it was really about those Locust origins, and then the later DLCs and stuff that happened in Gears 5's life cycle. You saw the introduction of some of the Locust for Horde and stuff like that.
Exactly, and it's not only just that as well. For whoever did Hivebusters, this is off the top of my head. I'm no lore nerd, unfortunately, but I remember Lani. This one always stood out for me in Hivebusters. She said she was part of a task group that hunted the remaining Locust after the events of Gears 3, and that always stood out to me because it sort of confirmed my theory that they really want to do the Locust more than the Swarm. I feel like when they did the Swarm, they ripped themselves in a corner because they didn't know exactly what to do with them. I feel with that line, they really kept that open for them to reintroduce the Locust at some point. And I feel like they're doing E-Day to really get a good feeling of how the Locust should be done again before they reintroduce them in Gear 6. That's just my guess.
Well, if I can, I think you make a good point, and something else that you think about kind of behind the scenes as you're talking about that is when you talk about the Swarm compared to the Locust, as someone who's just playing the game casual or whatever, it doesn't matter. The Swarm doesn't come off very like scary or anything compared to how the Locusts were back in, when you first got introduced to Gears 1, Gears 2, and Gears 3. Even in Gears 4, it just felt like in Gears 5 to some extent, it was just a duplicate replica of what you've already seen from the first 3 games, and then a little bit of a robot mechanic to it with the DBs and the DB swarms, but it never like captured that. So I think you're right with not only the coalition's idea, but also the fan perspective too. Is we're not really jiving with the swarm or DB, so let's kind of go back to what we know is what works. I never actually thought about the Hivebuster DLC that way. I like that.
That was just always my self theory, but I think a part of the reason why we don't really care about the Swarm as much is because I don't think they handle it as well as they should in Gears 5. Like, for example, Gears War 1, you learn about threat, you learn they've got a hierarchy. In the cutscenes, you hear a woman's voice with a lot of, imposing, what's the term? A lot of authority in there. And you learn straight away, is that a queen? Is that a leader? What's going on there? You learn about General Ram. And, you learn about the threat. And then Gears 2 further develops their culture and their religion and their architecture. What did Gears 5 do for the Swarm? Gears 4, I think, did a decent way of introducing them with Act 3 and sort of slightly touching where they might have came from, in terms of evolving from the Locust with the crystal cocoons, even though it doesn't fully explain why the Swarm are created from human remains, but at least we know about the Scions. But 5 didn't expand on it. Expanded on the Locust again.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And that's the problem. Like, we just don't care about the Swarm. Like, what are these people? I don't know. Like Locust? We got another Scion. Do you want him? That's all we got, really.
What about the COG, though? Like, yeah, there's the Locust versus Swarm side, but even people haven't been resonating as much with the new human characters. I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus here, but something I did find really interesting was seeing a tweet from a past developer who was like, oh my god, I'm so thankful that they're going, I'm paraphrasing here, but I'm so thankful that they're going back to these original characters. I wasn't really a fan of the new characters, and these new ones are just awesome. And the fact that it was a past developer who's since left the company saying that shows that if that person's feeling that way, there's probably a lot of other people in the studio who are feeling the same way as well.
I mean,
Yep.
I know a lot of people and content creators made notes about the writing of certain characters and how certain situations were handled with them. I don't hate them at all, but they don't resonate with me as much as the original cast did. And I think a lot to do is with their personality. The original Gears cast had a more, they had better chemistry and bubbly personality, even when they were a bit grungy. You know, you always had, like, for example, Cole was there as the comic relief, and there was a lot of banter between them. Where with this one, it doesn't feel like as much as banter; it just feels a bit fan-fictiony, if you know what I mean. But I never hated it, and I actually quite like the Gears 5 cast, but not as much as the original. So I can kind of see where people.
Yeah, I don't mind the original, or I don't mind the new cast that much. I don't hate them. I don't love them.
Yeah, I think that's exactly. Go ahead, Ace. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the classic characters are classic characters by their very nature and are very appealing to the original core fan base. I think it was a genuine attempt to try and expand the personalities to appeal to other types of personalities and other fans and things, and that might have rubbed the original fan base the wrong way a bit. But I do think you find it in a lot of literature, a lot of stories, character arcs. It usually is the ones that start out from quite a bad, arrogant place that when you see an actual well done character arc later on, they can become your favorite. So, it's always worth keeping the benefit in the mind that even the most sort of your impression of the most arrogant, annoying character could come back round and say things. I think the Gears 5 story for me felt a little bit rushed when it came to like Faz, because he was supposed to be obviously quite annoying and arrogant at the onset, and I mean, obviously, a lot of people will gel with that character and love him from the get go and that, but a lot of others will be great the wrong way and think, oh, what a jerk, and just hope he gets his or something, the Carmine treatment or something. But at the end, because it was kind of rushed, I wasn't sure whether it was entirely honest. But you realise in the last act that no, they have come around and they're there to help. So it was quite a quick redemption arc that kind of, I think, shortened it a bit, but it's there and it can happen. It can happen for any of the characters that you don't take on well too much. But I think with time heals a lot of things. A lot more people will probably be keen to see how they end up. But I think it's a good call for a bit of a diversion at the moment to rally around the more traditional characters. But you never know who else they might squeeze in there that we weren't aware of. And there's always chances of loads of, I don't know, stranded characters or something, and to round it out a bit more. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to lore and characters in a little bit here.
Yeah.
But
On the Gears 4 and the bit, I think I quite enjoyed the reveal of like the Juvies and the Snatcher. I thought they were quite good and did actually, first time I played it, that kind of made me jump. Perhaps not quite as much as in Gears 1, the
Like
first
a berserker.
Berserker. Thank you. I kept thinking
Yeah.
Meteor. I'm like, no, it's not that one. What's the other one?
Yeah.
Berserker.
Mhm.
Yeah, that. Yeah, I think most people were probably reading from that one for quite a while. So fingers crossed on that in something along those lines in E-Day. But I think it not to. I can't think of a way of saying this very nicely, but I think this setting for E-Day is perhaps a bit easier to do a Gears game on than trying to continue Gears 5 and Gears 6, because it's in a setting that is when they're rebuilding, or they have been rebuilding, so it's quite an optimistic, quite a bright time, hence why the game's quite bright, and it's a bit difficult to try and carry on with that. Whereas if you go back to the beginning of E-Day and everything going on and everything's just collapsing, buildings are falling into these emergence holes and all the rest of it, it's a lot easier to have it dark and gritty and that feeling of helplessness, and we've got to pull together because everything's going to pot. I think it is a lot easier to build a Gears game around that. That is the original setting, and it's again perhaps because they're dealing with a new engine. Let's go with something that's very familiar, not try and try and meld things like modern day and modern characters, and while still trying to be Gears and not bite off too much more than they can chew. I think is another possible reason why they've gone back to E-Day. And yeah, and I think 4 was actually quite good. And I don't think I've heard many people criticize 4 much anymore. So, with time, I think a lot more people will feel that way at Gears 5, especially towards the end when they made so many changes to improve it and go back and fix what was perhaps not the best direction for some bits at the launch. And I think really showed that they care about the fans and tried to improve things for the fans. The amount of work they did on the PvE alone was incredible. And yeah, and I think this is another sign that they've heard us and they're adjusting, and again, kind of showing what they can do. And looking forward to how that plays out.
Yeah, Neon, you had something in there?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, to Terry's point earlier, and to kind of go on that, if you really think about it, Kate is. I don't dislike Gears 5 story. I got more invested in 5 than 4, to be quite honest. But I would say, like, I think this is going to go through a cycle of where, it's definitely Locust focus going forward for Kate because of the medallion ends up having the Locust Horde symbol on it. And then also to that point, I think Gears of War, the franchise as a whole, is just going to go through the cycle of what Call of Duty and Halo goes through, where the current game is too far from the original. So as time goes on, or as you're playing it real time, you're like, nah, this doesn't capture my feelings of my youth or what it was a few years ago. And then 2 or 3 years pass, 4 years, 5 years pass after the new game comes out, and you're like, oh, you know what, that wasn't too bad. And I think that might be where we go, which is why at the very beginning, I think they should definitely come out with the Gear 6. I would never say no to that because I think it deserves its conclusion. I just think they need to really be tactful with how they're doing it, and maybe with the launch of E-Day, this is also buying them time to figure out how they want to write that story for conclusion, especially to Chap's point where you leave the game on a cliffhanger while there's assumptions about where the actual decision lies.
Yeah.
It's not fully confirmed either. So I think they need to find some time to figure that out. I think that what everybody has said so far though is like truly just, I think, very representative of the community at large. And I think going back to the roots is an easy way to have that dark, gory theme.
I do wonder if they're laying breadcrumbs there for us because, like you said, the amount of going back to the origins of the Locust in 5, and you've got Niles, well, sort of Niles there, and they're sort of disconnecting Kate and then having it go back to Reyna, and now they have a spoiler. Sorry, everyone. Now got a queen again. They showed even in the
bro,
last
I ain't
act
finished the
that,
game.
oh, sorry. They even showed in the last act that with her presence, just briefly, their technology level increased in their weapons. So I think part of the reason why people are maybe not bigger fan of the Swarm as the Locust is because the Swarm feels like they were forced to kind of do that to reinforce their ranks. They were consuming humans and using them to generate them, and most of the time in the game they were half formed and all the rest of it, weren't they? So I think with Niles, I think and Reyna, I think it will be that they will come back as stronger Locust and perhaps less Swarm, less Juvies, less thing, because that was kind of like a transitional phase. And now that they're back and they've got Nars and they've got Reyna, and I think you will probably see more Locust and maybe even Super Locust or something to that degree. And I think it will just have been a transitional period. I mean, that's one way I could see it working out, or based on what we've seen in 4 and 5. And yeah, that would be quite good, wouldn't it? I should think, because some of the scions in 5, with the crystals and everything, you never know what Niles could have been cooking up for like the next evolution for the drones and things. So that could be exciting because obviously they're going to try and make the drones a lot more intimidating in E-Day, and then in order for that to kind of translate to repeat that into like Gear 6 or whatever in the future, I'd imagine they'd have to have some sort of reason for why they're now just not the cannon fodder anymore. Now there will be some sort of evolution, is my guess, or something along those lines. Certainly, yeah, like because they've got a queen again, she's not gonna just sit by. They've already shown very quick adaptation in weaponry. I think it'll be biological as well. At least that's how I sort of see it playing out. Be interesting to see what they do in it. But that's obviously going to be quite a ways off for the moment. But
Yeah.
I'll be looking forward to E-Day in the meantime.
So I want to cycle back to something Terry mentioned, which was the Gears feed tweet, which, yeah, I don't think any of us have seen the full interview. We may have seen the article, but the article seems to take some of Phil's word and paraphrase things a little bit and talks about the old coalition versus the new team. And I think that probably was taken out of context a little bit, but it is important to note that, like, Rod, the studio head, left. We had some of their senior level designers. We had, I think, one of the art directors left. Bonnie, who was it Bonnie? Who's doing campaign type stuff. And Node Zero, Ryan, their like multiplayer gameplay lead, all left the studio. There's probably more. There's a lot of turnover in senior leadership there. So, I mean, you can make of that what you will, but with all the new leadership, there's ample opportunity for them to prove themselves and take the game in a new direction or manage the studio differently. So I'm very curious to see how things go under this new leadership. And actually, I'll add one other thing to that. Someone else who's there now kind of leads into the next topic. Andrew Parasidian is he was QA there. For those of you who don't actually, he was on the forums forever, the lead admin for Gearspedia. He was a regular on Tac-Com back when we first started. Actually, went and became QA at the Coalition. Ended up doing a lot of campaign QA. A lot of the characters that we love from Gears 5, like all those special skins that are deep in lore, he had a big hand in those. Now he is, I don't know what his official title is, but he's basically head of lore for Gears of War at the Coalition.
Yeah. Something like that, yeah.
So there's people who are worried that Coalition has messed up a lot of Gears stuff and they're going to mess up the lore going into E-Day. And they're worried that they're going to mess up this time period and do all this retcon stuff. Sid will do his best to make sure that doesn't happen. If I know Sid, like, he will fight for anything that does not make sense in the lore. So I guess let's talk about the implications of the lore in this game now.
Yes, our industry plant. He's doing his job. He's protecting the franchise.
Exactly. There's a reason that we sent Sid in there.
The mole.
Yeah,
the mole.
But yeah, I mean, so we've been talking about characters a lot. Obviously, Marcus and Dom are there. If we look back at that time period in the lore, coming off of the Pendulum Wars, they had Ty and Pad Sultan as part of their squad. It seems like they're probably part of the squad at the beginning of Emergence Day time frame. So we'll likely see the return of Ty. And then I didn't actually play Tactics. Was Pad in Tactics at all? Or, like, has Pad been in anything besides comics?
Pad. I need to expand my lore here. I haven't read much of the comics.
So I haven't read the comics either. I just know Pad Sultan was a... Patrick Sultan, yeah. He was like a South Island sniper.
No, he was not in Tactics. I played Tactics.
Okay.
He was not.
But yeah, he was a South Island sniper. I know some people... He hasn't been in much, but some people really liked his character. So I'm wondering if we're going to see him. They also had Baz, which is basically their jackbot that was reprogrammed named Baz. So be interesting to see if that's sort of our squad, the four of them plus the bot.
Oh yeah, I'm googling this as we speak. I really need to read the comics at some point.
I've never been a comic guy, so...
I think, isn't in the Pendulum Wars, and then also as we're leading into E-Day shortly after, doesn't Hoffman have a big role in all of this too, though? I don't know exactly where he lies during the time frame. I know he becomes, well, he's a corporal or something at some point, right?
I don't know the rank of like Hoffman or Prescott or any of the COG leadership. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I guess we know Prescott because Judgment, like Gears Judgment, Prescott was there.
Yeah, I mean he's the chair.
Yeah.
He's the chairman, right? So
Yeah.
he's basically
Yeah.
calling some shots there.
I think Hoffman's still quite high at this point. I think,
Yeah, he
because
would be.
pendulum wars and everything.
So what about you? In some of our pre-discussion, you threw out Gabe Diaz.
Yeah, Gabe Diaz, so Kate's father, right?
Yep.
So that would be an interesting way to tie things back to like Gears 4 and Gears 5 is having Gabe as one of the, maybe not one of the main characters, but someone who appears in the game.
Yeah, I would also be curious. We're talking kind of more on the COG side, but could there be more individuals that are from the UIR side of things that no one truly may not know? Like I wouldn't know most of them, but it would be
They might be able to expand on it. Like
that's what I was getting at, like expanding.
I mean, you
on
could
that a
have
little
like
bit.
ex-prisoners of war still in COG settlements that
I
have yet
think-
to be released. That could be expanded on, perhaps.
I think what's also important, for not just us to remind ourselves, but also for viewers, is like this E-Day is literally occurring like days. If
Yeah, I think it's like a
6
week.
weeks. It's literally days or a few weeks right after the Pendulum War.
6 or 7 weeks.
There's a peace treaty signed, and it's like, okay, hey, we're done here. We're done, and then here comes an E-Day, and the COG is like, hey, what are you guys up to? UIR, we're about to go back. We're doing this again, and then next thing you know,
it was 6 weeks. I just googled
6
it.
weeks.
6 weeks of peace.
Yeah, so you're literally no one's anticipating this, and then here you come from the ground up. You're getting demolished by things you've never seen before, and you're going through probably a media blast. I mean, think of it like real world, like thank God today we have the technology to have these type of things, but like usually you don't know exactly what's occurring right away. You don't know the facts and circumstances, so the COG is under the belief that, hey, we're back at war with the UIR. Turn to find out that's not actually occurring. Here come the Locust, something we've never seen before, which I thought was a really good job. But I think all that to say is I think it would be a good way for fans to get a little bit more of an understanding of the UIR and who those prominent characters could have been, and whether was there any of them assisting in any capacity, with our main character stories.
Do you think
it's interesting that you mentioned that, actually, because I do believe it'd be very cool if at first when the Locusts come out, it has the full. I don't know if you remember, in Gears 1, they used to have some of them used to spawn with like a full helmet where you couldn't see their face at all. Wouldn't it be cool if the first time you see them, it's like they're fully covered, so like the COG don't even know, as you say, it could be just another UIR task force just trying to. They broke away from the UIR and they're just trying to do a surprise attack, take them off guard, and just go in for the kill. And then a couple of skirmishes later, you blow one of the heads off, and it's like, wait, they sent UIR. This is some ugly ass motherfucker, Like, I'm pretty cool.
Are we gonna see that dynamic? You think of the COG maybe blaming the UIR and then realizing, oh, this is something else. We as humanity need to work together to fight this. And when that first happens, you're going to see that struggle between the two different factions of realizing, hey, we hate each other, but we need each other. It'll be an interesting dynamic to see if they cover that.
I know story-wise, like the normal COG soldier would probably think it's the UIR, but if I remember correctly, the top heads of the coalition of governments, they did know it was the Locust. And I remember in Gears 3, you get told that Adam was even talking to Mirror directly in ways to try and solve the Lambent threat. So it's going to be interesting to see the dynamic between leadership and the standard COG grunt in terms of like this attack and how it's being handled. There's a lot you can explore. There's a lot to do.
I think you actually just brought up a really good point because yes, we're talking about E-Day and here they come, but you also have to understand like why are the Locusts coming up from the ground anyways, and a lot of that is because of Mira and Marcus's dad Adam. from my understanding of the lore, again, I'm not the lore expert in any capacity, but my understanding is that, you know, Adam, Marcus's dad, is trying to help the Locust in some ways. And I think he doesn't really do a good job of doing that. And so then all hell breaks loose. And then
Yeah.
that's so I think they could, with what they're doing with this game, I could see them go, they could go so many angles. I just don't, it's all speculation, right? So that's what makes it fun, is like you can have all these theories about what they're going to do.
Exactly. And as we always said, you know, we knew the COG Elite always knew E-Day was happening. I mean, that's why they all went to Azora as soon as they could.
Yeah. So, do you think we'll see Maria or Dom's kids?
Ooh,
I expect so.
I think you need to.
I mean, there could be something
that
that like hits you right in the feels, you know.
I reckon the first few scenes of the game will literally be you probably play the last mission of the Pendulum Wars, then they all come home, and then you have a moment with Adam and Marcus, Dom's family, and then it all goes tits up, and you see them get split apart. There's a lot of things they can do to tug on your heartstrings. Let me tell you.
Well, not everyone comes back, as we know, and that's part of what they've already said, isn't it? It's because this is the stage before Dom and Marcus are even that close. Marcus
Well,
fought with
they're on a
his brother
squad together.
Carlos.
I mean,
They are now, yeah, because he's taken the spot of his brother Carlos, isn't he? Because
right.
that's who Marcus fought with during the Pendulum Wars. And as they said in their statement out, the personal story is that they're both grieving the loss of Carlos, you know, Dom's brother and Marcus's teammate. Can't think of the right word, but yeah. And it's sort of, you know, they're trying to build that that relationship together over the loss, and it'd be interesting to see whether Dom initially blames Marcus, you know, for not looking after his brother out there or something. I don't know, and whether it's kind of bit tenuous to begin with until they, you know, they perhaps save each other's necks a couple of times and stuff, you know, and I'm sure there will be a scene with like Maria and Dom and everyone in the family sort of obviously crying the loss of his brother, you know, Carlos. So I should think that's probably going to play a part in it. That'll be the thing to set things up. So maybe you play that mission at the beginning and at the end of the Pendulum Wars. You know, it's got to. You'd imagine it would play a part or be a cutscene or something of that nature. I'd imagine.
So what about Anya? Do you think we'll see anything from, because she didn't join the COG until later in the Locust War, when, because women weren't allowed to join the COG, right? It was only later that they were eventually allowed in. But I mean, Marcus and Anya, obviously they knew each other before the Locust War, so I wonder if we'll see anything there. And just the thought of hearing Anya like in your mic or in your headset, like when you're walking around, and she's sort of that controller person or the communications person. What are we gonna have now?
Yeah, because you had Baird, you know, doing that mainly in 5 and 4, 2, I think, maybe. Can't exactly remember.
No, he was a surprise in 4.
Oh, that's right. He was the surprise in 4, and then he's doing all the comms in 5, which, you know, that game is for the. Yeah, you make a great point, because like literally like every game other than that and maybe Judgment had a narrator in your head where you're putting your sausage fingers up to your head and saying Delta, you know, like control whatever, you know. And I think that's a good point too. Dude, Terry, I think you were spot on. Like, I think the coalition and then that developers' tweets really are starting to resonate the more I think about this, because like all the bosses that we got like in the character store and shop and like all those that came out all go back to this time frame.
The Locust,
yeah, it's like right at the very start. So I think it's very. I could see a lot of those that got introduced in 5 making an appearance, and I also would be considered like, I think really what's kind of most notable is, what does the coalition want to do in terms of like time skipping? Do they want to do a lot of time skipping, or do they want to keep this within, you know, 48 72 hour type thing?
I thought I read something that said it was just going to be a few days. This would only span a few days, which is interesting.
Lots to cover in a few days. It's quite a lot to cover in those days. I
mean,
mean, I'll tell you what, the one thing I'm more excited for, don't get me wrong, the COG and the Pendulum Wars, the finishing of that and getting a sneak peek of that is all good. The Locust coming back. Now that's what's interesting to me because we got technically all the Locust leaders are alive during E-Day, including Serac. So you could see glimpses of him in a main Gears of War game. You got Vrol, who hasn't had his own game yet. He's only been introduced as a Gears 5 character in multiplayer. Ukon's still alive during E-Day. Khan, Scourge was one of Vrol's proteges during that time as well. You could see a full Locust cancel at their full strength. And depending how they introduce the Locusts and show their politics, I mean, there's a lot they can expand on that. And that's very exciting to me.
What do you think of the big bad? Do you think it will be... I can't see it being like Rom, Karn, Scourge, or like any of the ones that we've fought previously as the big bad.
Maybe Jamad.
Yeah, it's like we may see those people or those enemies, but in terms of the actual big bad of the game, I think it would have to be someone that we haven't really fought in a mainline game before.
I think it would have to be Jamad, maybe. I don't think...
or do you think they'd introduce someone new?
Death. They could introduce something new, but like I said, there's a lot of characters that were high in the Locust army that have not been in the game. And when I think of the Locust War, I do think of like Jamad, who was like a very elite Locust sniper, and I think he was a sergeant in Brahm's force. Well, and I know that he took part in quite the first few battles as well. So I don't see why we couldn't see him, and he could be a baddie because, well, the Locusts are still brand new to the COG and they're struggling to attack him, so a sergeant even causing them that much problems could be quite interesting in terms of a dynamic.
Yeah, and there's also the opportunity now to bring back some enemies that we haven't seen in a long time, like
Rages.
The Rager from Judgment.
Blood mounts?
Blood
mounts?
Yeah, I was thinking about tickers. Were tickers... They weren't in Gears 1. Is there anything in the lore about tickers like existing? Like when did they first... I feel like they wouldn't have been something that existed at the time of E-Day, but I wasn't sure. But I'm
Googling it as we speak.
Don't they have emulsion or on...
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so like there's couldn't they have been part of the planning to like, hey, we're gonna have these little small bombs, I guess you could say, ready to go?
It could be.
Yeah.
And if it's not, the tickers and trackers fill a similar role, where it's that weak, tiny enemy, but a decent punch if they get to you. It would be interesting if they have to do a different enemy, maybe, instead of the ticker. But maybe the ticker is an option. Did we see them in Judgment?
The tickers were in Judgment.
Were they? Okay.
We could see like... Yeah, we could even see Papa Wretches. I know they were a cut enemy from Gears 3, I believe, where you had Wretches with frags connected to them, if I remember correctly. So you could see that as an early form.
The one boomer that came in with like Wretches, and he would like take a Wretch and throw it at you and stuff.
Chuck it at you, yeah.
That was...
if they bring back some of the cut enemies, that would be really cool. I hope they do. Because that's a good way to expand upon the original enemies without it being too... these before, it's more believable that we just didn't run into them in the campaign on our missions, but they were always there in the background.
They got extinct, a bit like the krill from Gears 1. You didn't see them.
I hope we see the krill again.
Are they tied specifically to Ram? Or I suppose in the game you got attacked by them without him around, didn't you?
Yeah.
So I don't know if they might be the first wave of stuff to come out of the hills along with the drones and things. But there's always a possibility there were other things that then died off and we didn't hear of in Gears 1. So,
Yeah. I think that's a good opportunity. The ones that died off and we just never saw in Gears 1, I do somewhat worry about how they'll handle... there's some enemies that it seems like Marcus and Dom and everyone experiences for the first time in Gears 1. Like the drones, obviously they're used to those by the time Gears 1 starts, but like the Theron, for example, the first time that they see the Theron, or I don't remember if Gears 2 was explicitly the first time that they saw a Cantus, but that type of thing where like I would love to have those characters back, but I'm curious to see how they handle it from a lore and continuity standpoint of bringing those in on a pre-Gears 1 game.
True. Yeah. I was thinking of the more bigger beasts. So, like when you see the Corpser, Marcus already knows it's a Corpser and tells
Right.
everyone. But that might be a rarity. But I think you do catch. I think it's a Corpser climbing out in the E-Day trailer.
Yep.
Yeah, I think
There's a
some
few.
people.
Yeah,
There's
it
a
is,
few.
isn't it? It looks
There's a few.
something like that because I didn't think it was a Reaver. I mean, well, those kind of fly anyway, don't they? So I thought it
Yeah.
must have been a Corpser. Oh, Reavers would be another one that we'll probably see back again. And Nemeclists. How do you say it?
A Nemesis.
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 Yeah, the
Those things. 'Cause,
Nemesis. Those will be back if you, for sure, because you're gonna have that and probably the Krill most the Krill
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah, I mean they were all in
Was it-
Rom's Shadow as well, right? The
Yeah.
Nemesis and the Cedars and
Yeah.
the Krill.
Cedars. That was it. That's what I was trying to think of.
Is
Cedars.
that plural? Nemesists? Nemesists?
Nemesis.
Nemesi? I don't know. Sorry.
They've always said
kinda-
Nemesis in the thing, so that's what
Yeah.
I would know them as.
that must be right. No, I was just saying that thinking, oh, is that right? That's always how White said it, but
So, beyond the enemies, what about weapons? When we were talking characters, there was a lot of talk about UIR. Are we going to get to see a lot of UIR weapons introduced
You'd imagine
now?
so. They've like confiscated them from captured soldiers and things. The good old Mark One of the Markser should be back. Is it the Bushka that was
Bushka?
around
Bushka.
I
there?
love the Bushka.
Judgment.
Yeah, that was a good one. Breach Dot is one of my favorite snipers.
Yeah, the breach
mean-
shot
So
coming
UIR
back would be fantastic.
Is there a UIR pistol? That could be an option.
It's a snub.
What, they use the same thing? It's snub.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
it's like the old 1911. It just doesn't fall out of fashion, does it?
You have the Marsa is still around at that time too. Obviously, you can see that. I think that's around. That was being used. I don't know if it was around at that time, but that's a weapon.
I mean it was in Judgment, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
Mark,
So
the Mark
yes.
One, the scoped one. That's what Ace was saying. I think is the scoped Marksa. In there.
And the breach shot was modeled off the Markser. I remember.
Yeah,
actually.
the breach shot was a modified Marksa. So, it'll be interesting to see the new weapons that they introduce, or taking some of the UIR ones. It's going to be very interesting though how they'll have to cut back some weapons. I saw a couple people like really excited they'll be able to see the digger again, but I'm like, no, that was more of a savage Locust weapon.
Yeah,
So the
I
digger
don't think-
wouldn't exist then.
I don't think that's coming back.
Obviously, no Lancer GL either.
Yeah, well, and then I guess talk about the Lancer. Like they've already said that the Mark II with the chainsaw is going to be in the game because it's not Gears without the ability to chainsaw a Locust, right?
Yep.
But
Yeah, it's going to be like a prototype or something, isn't it? I think.
lore
Although
wise,
I think Marcus will probably end up chainsawing one in one mission and then go, "That's a good idea." Attach it.
I think lore-wise, it was Ty, and
it was
he tells
Ty.
Adam.
Oh, Ty, sorry, beg pardon. Yeah, Ty.
Yeah.
And then probably in the next act you'll have an upgrade, and there you go.
If the game really does only span a few days, though, then we wouldn't be seeing
You
that.
wouldn't see it.
They don't have to be consecutive days, do they?
So I guess I thought I could have sworn I read that it's going to span a few days. But
If it spans if it spans a few days, that makes sense because I think it was like many years later where it actually became standard.
Yeah,
Like years. So
Yeah, I mean, so
wonder how they
retros then.
maybe we'll see the like you mentioned, Ty chainsawing a Locust for the first time and being like, "Holy crap, this works!" Because I mean, by the time the Mark II is introduced, it's not only did they accept that concept, but they've gone through R&D and developed that into that weapon. So maybe we would see the idea, like that concept time when it's first thought of by Ty.
I'm pretty sure that's the law, isn't it? Because the drone's hide is just too hard to get the bayonet into.
Right.
So the retro Lancer's kind of a bit old hat. It was all right for the Pendulum Wars, but it's probably just not so good for these enemies.
Yeah.
They didn't mention the retro at all in the interviews and things and stuff, which I thought was a bit odd.
No, I mean, you saw it in the trailer, but yeah, I mean, for interviews, no one cares about the retro. They want to know about that Mark II, the chainsaw.
Yeah.
Gears is the game with the chainsaw gun.
Iconic. Exactly. Yeah, it's just too iconic at this point. I think it'd be very foolish if they didn't introduce it in E-Day.
Yeah.
At some point.
if it's not, it would be nice to see the progression, like you said, of the R&D. But even if it doesn't make a full blown appearance in the campaign, for example, I wouldn't be too upset about it, assuming there is a multiplayer, which most likely there will be. So as long as it's in that, I think that would be
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah, I
I mean,
mean, we'll talk about multiplayer and like outside of campaign modes here in a bit, but I think it's safe to say that in any of the Gears games, PvE and multiplayer are fair game. They can throw whatever they
yeah,
want in
they
there.
can.
It does not have to follow lore.
And even campaign, I would say in a lot of the games, the first mission, there is usually quite a time skip after that, and then the rest of the game. I'd be surprised if that doesn't also occur here as well.
Yeah.
And you don't know how long that first mission, what will be involved in it, or first act, or whatever it is, and then there's a time jump, isn't there? So although
Yeah.
it's a few days, I'm pretty sure it'd be surprising if they just kept it to a really short window of a couple of days, because there's some good goodies to get in there that fans want to see.
So, what about the feeling of the game? Like we've discussed some of the lore and the weapons and enemies and stuff. The coalition has said in a couple interviews now that they want to go back to that nightmare, the Locust being that enemy that is a nightmare for you, and seems like that darker attitude, and it really showed off in the trailer how the drone is so strong and just pins Marcus up against the ceiling. Back to those roots of what a drone is versus the cannon fodder, as we said, that it's become. How do you think they're going to accomplish that going back to the roots of the more horror-esque vibe?
Well, I'll get it started. I think the what was interesting is as you know all of us do, and I'm sure most watching do, but for those that don't, there was a lot of speculation going around through some rumors about like the coalition was focusing a lot on melee combat, and at that time I was like, they're gonna do something else. They're not doing that. Like but knowing the context, assuming that rumor was actually true, which probably it is now, given what we know today about Gears E-Day, I think that they're gonna really try to focus and on making the Locust as scary as possible. That was confirmed in like kind of the one of the interviews I read about trying to make them show their brute force for that first time about like we're not playing around, but I would assume that not every single location has weapons readily available. Or if they did, they got, like you saw in the trailer, they get knocked out and Marcus is over here trying to like pick it up. I could see where they're probably going to do a lot more hand-to-hand combat. Especially after fighting a war for so many years and just finally getting peace, they're probably replenishing and developing, or as we know, they're developing other things, but replenishing ammo and their resources at that point. So I think like just going back, getting the game to be more horror, like in Gears 1, where you would just have a wretch scream at you with a black screen, and the next thing you know, you're like, whoa, what the hell is happening? There's a wretch screaming in my freaking face, and like it jumps you back. Or you have those little jump scares. The Gears franchise has gotten away from that a lot since probably the first game, honestly. I think they should do that. And then in terms of the one of the biggest things that I think has been the most vocal thing I've seen, and I've been a part of that too, dating back to when I was like 15, 16, 17 years old, and Gears 2 drops, and the blood and everything just feels like it's the light shade of blood. And it felt like, there's so much speculation going back to 2008 about like, oh, it's Microsoft policy, can't be this, it can't be that. But everybody was like, we want that dark, gory blood. Like that's what Gears is. That's what the first game said it to be. So I think as long as they're focusing on that, they can bring in so many just like like I said, fanfare, fan appreciation, just to get them back saying, hey, we're listening.
I think I saw something a while back that talked about how they had a concept at one point where they modeled some of the internals, and they talked about like just bodying someone at the top of the stairs in gridlock and you see like their liver rolling down the stairs or something like that. And this was back in like concepts for earlier Gears games in the original trilogy, but they decided that they need to strike that balance between realistic gore and cartoon so that it doesn't like overwhelm people too much. In every game, it seems like they've changed where their bar is, where they set that. So it'll be really interesting to see, especially with them mentioning that OG gore. It'll be cool to see where they set the bar this time.
If the trailer's any indication, That's what I've been wanting forever. Like, and I've said this so many times. Like you the perfect example was I've always said this is like the headshots in Gears One felt different than any other game. You know, where like for example, you headshot someone like while they're running, and they literally just like boom collapse, skull goes popping, and just blood spews up, or you know, like those type of things. I don't think are truly captured in the most recent games, not just the Coalition, but even maybe even three to some extent. So I think like if this is what they're indicating and that's what they're showing in the trailer, which if that's in-game engine, which it says it is, and I believe it to be, and everything else, like all that other nonsense that's out there, screw that. I think that this is going to be truly a very gory game, and I'm hoping that they have that creative freedom to do it.
So you talked about the melee aspect of it, or that hand to hand. With them focusing so much on the looks of the Locust, do you think it's going to be a more CQB, like close quarters style game? Especially with Gears leaning so heavily into like shotgun gameplay traditionally.
Yeah, I don't know if I would necessarily say it's going to be more of that, but I think it will kind of go back a little bit to it. So I want to also be very clear here that close quarter combat, I love it. I love that much more than any other type of gameplay out there. That goes for just about any game I play. That's a shooter game in any capacity. But what I could see them doing is implementing those quick time, what it's like a quick time action or
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
where like there's like you have to press a button sequence, for example, in some of these like scenarios, kind of where like in some of the games where you have the camera's completely paused, but you have the full capacity to see like the entire room. And I think in Gears 5, you're like trapped under and you're using one of the Talon.
Talon.
You're using
Yeah.
the Talon, you're just killing the juvies or whatever that are coming down. I could see it being something similar to that, but also a little bit more interesting potentially to where like when you're jumping over cover, it's not just a stab with a knife now. It's like I can potentially meat shield you immediately, even though you're not dead. I can meat shield you, take you hostage, or
And have that
do something.
struggle
Yeah,
back from the
yeah,
enemy.
Probably not
yeah. I mean,
that.
like you don't know exactly what could occur, but those are just some of the things that I think I could see them trying to redefine, especially with like all these new things that they're potentially able to do in Unreal Engine 5. I think that would be great to expand on. I think it would captivate a lot of different ways to play the game.
So yeah, it's a we've got to remember set expectations. It's an action shooter, cover based shooter. So, but I agree. You might get like they're like set pieces, aren't they? I think they call them so. Or you might get the quick time. I thought the quick times kind of fell out of fashion a bit. But
I mean,
what
not
I
if they
would like
have
them,
jump scare type things like you're in a,
yeah,
you
jump
know,
scare,
those
set piece,
areas
jump
where
scare
like
kind of thing.
they use them sort of for loading screens a lot, where you're walking through like Neon sausage
Yeah,
fingers up on the ear, walking through, talking to control, and it's a slower thing like
yeah,
that. When you're in that sort of controlled environment like that, and
yeah.
like a drone jumps out to grab you, and that sort of jump scare, and you're in that hand to hand thing, I feel like they could do some quick time stuff there.
Yeah, sort of set pieces, scripted sort of thing. Yeah, I definitely see that happening. What I would love to see is in the course of the game, if you're, not doing so well, your health is going down, rather than you just die and get the omen. It would be great if it initiated a set piece that, uh-oh, you're in trouble now. The drone's come over, he's grabbed hold of you, got you by the throat, and yeah, you've got a couple of options. Do you try and stab with a knife? Do you know, um, yeah, just try and hit him with
Like
whatever
a
bit of
last chance
magical
mechanic
advice.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, last chance sort of
But
mechanic sort of
I
thing
swear there
would
was a
be quite
game that
good.
had something similar to that, but I can't recall it. But it sounds so familiar.
Yeah, I know. I don't remember what game it is, but I remember something similar to that where you can like try to fight for your survival.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, that would be nice to see. And yeah, I'm looking. It's exciting because they've said it's going to be the scary. The drone's obviously going to be very imposing. I remember that berserker moment, and I'm just looking forward to those sorts of things. And jump scares, and going back to your youth with the games, and like the first time like Resident Evil Zombie jump scares you and everything. Just the great sort of horror of those sort of days of the video games. And along, as you said, with the blood and gore as well, being a bit more realistic, and helps to draw you in and keep you in, and not sort of push you out from slightly cartoony graphics or anything. But yeah, I'd love to see them put that kind of mechanic in it, because that would be it'll keep you a bit more invested in the moment, I think, because you want to try and avoid anything that probably will draw you out if they want to maintain that horror feeling and setting. So a kind of last chance mechanic is probably a little bit better than like a button mashing quick time sort of thing.
I think the things that really stood out to me between watching the trailer and then seeing the articles and stuff, it almost to me was like, hey, we're leaning into this more horror-esque type thing. It's still going to be Gears, but maybe the campaign will be slowed down a little bit and a little more close quarters and a little bit tougher enemies. And that's kind of just my gut feeling of how it would be.
Yeah. If it is slowed down and there is last chance mechanics, it could also lean into the Brotherhood. So you might be grabbed by the Locust and you've had it, but your teammate can save you as long as the AI is good, unless hopefully you've got your buddies playing with you. And then it's down to them to rescue you by whatever means to get this drone off you. A bit like I started listening again to the books, listening to Asphalt Fields and the beginning of that, where Dom's not looking too good, and it's thanks to a sniper that rescues him, taking out half the head of the drone that's currently choking him out. So it would be nice to see bits like that as well, where it's like you've got to keep your wits about you and keep your eyes on your teammates, and if they're in a sticky spot, you've got to help them. So it's close quarters, and it's keeping an eye on your teammates as well. Folds into the story then of the Brotherhood, which they also sort of mentioned quite extensively in their press releases.
Let's see. Anyone else have anything you want to talk about for the feeling of sort of the campaign section, or do you want to move on and talk about the non-campaign?
I feel like everyone's sort of touched upon the realistic output of it. I don't think there's anything more I can add on this part, to be honest. All I have to say is I just gotta wait on gameplay and play a beta or something until I can have full confirmation on that. So
yeah,
watch this space, I suppose.
I suppose we should definitely mention that they're obviously relicensing the music, and they've got Mad World, and they've rejingled a bit as well. Did a fantastic
Brother.
render for the trailer. So looking forward to see what they do with that in the game. So hopefully, the music will absolutely sort of fit it as well, and bring back those old vibes. Yeah, a lot of us veterans, when we heard that, I'm sure all the hairs stood up on that for a moment, just to hear those few little bars going, and then yeah. So looking forward to that, very atmospheric and dark and gritty. So it's the look and it's the sound as well. It's always very important.
It's just so iconic.
Gears 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know about 5, but Gears 1, 2, 3, 4, and now this all have that trailer that has fans just like hyped and pumped. And I think this did a really good job of both the artistic side of it, the setting, and then the audio was fantastic. All right.
I imagine the sound effects for the drones and things are also going to be equally quite eerie and terrifying, hopefully.
Yeah. All right, so we talked about the sort of feeling of the game and a lot of the lore things. All of that kind of gets thrown out of the window, doesn't matter anymore once you get over to, I'll say, sort of the long term of the game. A lot of people play campaign a few times, but what really sustains the game in the long term is the PvE and the PvP. I guess, Terry, I'm shooting over to you. Pick PvE or PvP. What do you want to start with?
I mean, we all saw the first discussions when the game first came out about this game have multiplayer. And at first I thought, that's a strange question to ask. It's a main series in the Gears game. Of course, it can have PvP. Even says Steam pay. Oh wait, and it doesn't. Oh yeah, they've got rid of it. What's going on there? I have to speculate, and especially from some of the dev tweets which have been brought up at some point. I can't remember which dev it was, but he was like, it's a Gears game. It's gonna have things in it, and it was kind of alluding to the PvP aspect. So I think it will have a PvP. And I know Neon saw a job posting for an online client engineer, wasn't it?
Yeah. So they've been hiring for this position or trying to fill it for a little while now. So there's definitely going to be PvP some kind. Now, obviously, in job postings, they're never going to truly give it away because they're going to handle that probably with the candidate through an interview. But when you're hiring for these type of positions, they're not hiring for something way down the road. They're hiring it for what's going on now. So yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just reading the job posting quickly, because I still have it open from the other day, it does specifically say online client engineer, Gears of War, the Coalition. It'd be different if it was just the Coalition, because that could be any project, any sort of brainstorming.
Well,
no, it's specifically Gears of War. So now the question is, how is multiplayer going to be handled?
The online client could be for PvE or just connecting when you're doing campaign. But, I mean, it's a mainline Gears game. It's going to have PvP. Like,
yes.
Yeah. You're not going to spend years developing something and not include that. Like, especially with the most populated PvP game being Gears 5, which, while it's in a great shape today, when everybody's ready to go to E-Day, where's it going to be?
Yeah.
Great shape. Gears 5. I don't know.
I'm not gonna. I'm not saying it's the best. I'm just saying it's the most populated right now.
You'd hope so. It's the latest one.
Yeah. But I'll say on the whole Steam thing, like, that's people reading into stuff too much. People are grasping for any amount of information they can right now. They're reading too far into things. My guess is that the game was announced, it was posted up on Steam, and somebody said, okay, I need to put tags in there. What describes Gears? And they start going through all this stuff. There's the one, I think someone was saying it used to be titled as a hero shooter, and someone who's probably not super familiar with the series is like, oh, yeah, the horde and escape type thing, you select your heroes or whatever. The PvP thing, someone's, oh yeah, there's PvP, so we'll put that in there. And then it started to become a little more realistic probably, and they started clawing some stuff back. It's, okay, well, based on the trailer and based on what has been said in the interviews, here's the tags that we can comfortably put on it. Multiplayer has not been officially announced, so they probably just removed the tag for that reason. Hero Shooter was probably removed because someone pointed out, hey, it's like, hey, Gears isn't historically a hero shooter, and they haven't said it's a hero shooter, so they removed it.
I'd always say Overrun was a hero shooter.
Yeah.
It was actually a hero shooter before hero shooters were mainstream.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of the same premise, isn't it? Where you have a character with a certain ability and different roles, and if that's what you declare as a hero shooter, then Judgment had a hero shooter elements.
Yeah,
and we know
even Gears 5 has hero
expanded
shooter
upon
elements.
Exactly, we can see they expanded on that in Gears 5 Horde mode. So when I see hero shooter, I don't get worried. It just makes me think either Horde or Overrun, and Overrun would just make so much sense because there's so much.
The theme of what they're doing with E-Day and Overrun just they go together.
That makes sense. Yeah.
They need to figure out a way to do it, like where they don't have to have the specific maps set up for Overrun and split all the development and stuff. Yeah. But Overrun was a fantastic mode that I don't think there is anybody who looks back at Judgment and says, yeah, Overrun was terrible. So
no, I don't think there's really any. I guess we're going to focus a little bit on the PvP side first.
Yeah, sure.
I would say that, the biggest thing that the Coalition and, I would say the Coalition and Epic, because the Judgment was Epic Games. They try to do these new modes, but then to your point, Chaps, it's like they're curated for a specific map, and that's the problem when you look at other games in the industry. Like I think Halo did this a little bit with 5, if memory serves me correctly, and I didn't really, or maybe it was 4, like one of those like big battle modes or whatever. But what I'm really going to refer to is not to say that they need to follow this footprint, but it would be better is to follow what Call of Duty does and just make it accessible to your point, Chaps, of like, if you're going to put the mode in, just make sure it's playable on everything that's already there, because the maps also dictate whether the mode will be successful or not in its own right? And so, like, I mean, if you go back and use Judgment, they experimented a lot. You had the capture, was it Breakthrough? I don't think it was
Yeah.
Breakthrough.
Uh,
You had,
or no,
I mean,
breakthrough was the capture the flag thing in Judgment.
right, yeah. Which you had capture the flag. I think what was the meat shield thing in Gears
Gears
2.
2.
But
Gears 2, yeah.
but it felt better because you weren't carrying a meat shield around the whole time trying to deliver that, which was cool at the time. But like it didn't last long, in my opinion, of like being popular because carrying that thing around carrying around a human body is so freaking slow. And so I think like they had
Maybe
some
for
great
you,
modes.
go to the
Yeah.
gym, bro.
Yeah. Well, if I'm Marcus and Dom, or Cole, I'm not having no problems, I guess. But all that to say, like, you got an overrun. I think that's going to be obvious. But I think when you're talking PvP, there's really going to be 4 modes in particular that the fan base is going to say, and it's very decisive, or just kind of like everybody's divided, I should say, is it going to be, will Warzone and Execution return? Will those actually be popular? Because we've tried that many times now, and
I mean, I think they have to return, right? Like whether they will be in the game, whether it's a populated online playlist is a different question. That remains to be seen.
But that's where I'm going with this. Is so let's say that where do you want this to fall back on, right? Because if you introduce those single life modes, you know that creates some very tense things, and it's usually pretty competitive. Versus your team deathmatch or your King of the Hill or Control, whatever you want to call it. I'm very curious to see, and I'd love to hear everybody else talk about it a little bit. Like, where do you think they're going to just draw a path in the middle and say, okay, at launch it's going to be this, and then maybe later on you bring something else out, or do they say, okay, here's what we're used to. We know our player base loves the respawn modes, and here we go.
If they launch with respawn modes and then introduce single life modes, I don't think the single life modes will have any longevity to them. Agreed. If they launch with single life modes and then later introduce respawn modes, I think a large chunk of especially the younger audience, will not stick with the game at launch. So I kind of feel like they need to launch with both.
Do we go back to 4 or 5 players?
I mean, I think 5, or hear me out, teams of 2. Let's get some wingmen back in here.
I'm never going to turn down wingman.
Oh yeah, brother.
Yeah, I don't think in all the game modes anybody's ever going to say no to wingman. I think that's long requested.
How about one that we can rule out? We've all heard Gears cannot survive if it doesn't have a battle royale.
That's fair.
Oh, come on.
I see a 0% chance that this is going to have a battle royale mode.
How would Gears even do a battle royale with like the damages and the stuff?
I don't think we want to go down that stupid rabbit hole right here.
Are they even still popular anymore now? I thought they've all died off.
No, I mean it's a situation where it's market saturation with that genre, and if you're already at the top, you're doing fine.
Well, you need to do something to differentiate yourself, right? You need that unique identifier to make people want to play yours, which Gears could have. The Gears universe is a pretty cool universe, and it could be the close quarters battle royale if they wanted to do it, but it's not going to work out. And they're trying to go. This whole game is about going back to the roots of Gears. And I think doing that is going to put a bad taste in people's mouth.
I think asset-wise, story, characters, and the world, it sounds intriguing. But I think from what the substance Gears is, I don't think it translates very well into that kind of playstyle. As much as people would like and love it, I think what everyone would like to see is like some kind of, large-scale battle mode. Kind of like I don't know, Halo's Warzone, or
that's what I was getting at.
Like
it was Halo's Warzone. Yep.
Something like that, yeah. Or Helldivers sort of thing. I think that could and that could tie in quite well actually with the setting as well. That could be the PvP or PvPVE kind of mode that they introduce as the additional one, where it's perhaps it's a COG and UIR and then Locust popping up in the middle of it. It's there's lots of options there that they could go with. I should think. Kind of depends on how the main function of the game functions. If it's mostly COG v Locust, or if it's perhaps maybe a little bit more COG v Locust and COG v UIR, then it might bend itself to do those sort of things. But as you say, it's PvE and PvP, so the rules aren't quite as strict. Usually, though, in all mainline Gears games, there's been a additional PvE mode that has been kind of lore inspired or lore specific in some degree. Obviously, the characters and things are all up in the air, but there's usually been a reasoning behind it. So escape was, going into the what's it called, the hives, and planting, the venom gas and getting out. And in previous games, Judgment and Gears 5, and that, like, you've had their special modes as well. So, to anyone who's hoping to see escape, I doubt it. That's very obviously time specific to Gears 5. But hey ho, there's always a possibility of perhaps a evolution of that. So it could be, you're in a building and the building next to you has just suddenly gone down into an e-hole and it's getting bigger and you've got to escape out of the street or something, or out of the block. Or you've got to get to the center of it and close it up or something. Who knows?
Sound very Overrun-esque.
Yeah, yes, yeah, a bit like that as well. Or, I'm sure there's people listening that are probably shouting "beast mode" again. It's this is part of the problem. I think the poor developers have to cope with this variety of people, variety of players, and even within the scope of PvE, there's a variety of the different modes in the past that lots of people love and have their tier list of which one they like more. And it's how do you try and do something to satisfy as most people as possible? And again, with the PvE at launch, and I agree, I think you're going to need the respawn modes to keep the new players, the casual players, the younger players, but it's part of the staple, isn't it? Execution and Warzone. I think hopefully they might, since they helped out 343 with Halo Infinite, I'm hoping they might have taken on some information back as well with how Infinite has changed over the last year with their playlists and the struggles they've had with that. And I think just this month they've introduced the MCC Match Composer, which is an interesting thing to see that back again in Infinite, and perhaps going forward might be something to consider for Gears E Day. So then it's more, rather than it being like a whole mode, it's kind of like part of a playlist that you can sort of pick and mix, and then the community goes into a big pool, and then from that sorts the people into, so if there's any one modes that you just really don't want to play, you leave out, but the modes you don't mind, you leave them in, and then you could be playing Warzone or Execution or any of the others as well.
Yeah,
So
I think that Match Composer is sort of introduced as a hey, our population is dwindling, we need a way for people to find matches, so here's an idea. But while that's the whole reason in the inception of that Match Composer, I think that it is still something you could have at launch on a game, and maybe it's something that it shows, hey, you can easily find a match, and it stops people from leaving. Because a lot of people may have left because they couldn't find matches. But if you have something like that in there from the beginning, maybe it would deter people from leaving.
Yeah, exactly, isn't it? That's hopefully what we see there. I think regarding the Steam page thing, I think it's just a standard kind of, oh, it's the next one in the line. They probably just copied tags and things. And as with all things, features are subject to change. I'm sorry, it feels like a very corporate answer there, but you know what I mean? I think they've taken it away until you see an official confirmation, and then those tags will go back on. And if it's anything like Gears 5, where they reveal 1 week, the campaign, another week, the PvE, and then do a beta for the PvP.
God, please don't do like they did with Gears 5, where they showed Escape first of all things.
No.
No.
Honestly,
no.
Escape had me pretty hyped when they showed it.
I feel like
the PvE and PvP will fight.
in my core group that I play with is me plus 2 people, so a 3-person escape thing, and it was a PvE thing, which I really enjoy. Escape had me pretty hyped. I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would, but yeah. But yeah, they're not gonna kick it off. So I think you brought up an interesting point. The beta, they need to have a beta at some point. Really,
I'm sure there will.
yeah. I mean, even if it's not a true beta and it's just a demo, like basically every game does a beta of some sort now. But something to give people a taste. One, it helps news cycle. It helps them spread out the news cycle a lot by having that beta. It gives something to lead up to, and then people to talk about while it's going on, something to talk about after it's going on, so it helps them have more time for development without it feeling quite as long. And it also is just if it's done properly, it's a great opportunity to find those issues with the game before it launches. And reaffirm to people that, hey, look, we can do this. We know how to make a Gears game. And give people that opportunity to get back in and try it out so that they're hyped for launch.
I do find though with demos, they never probably like to admit to it, but I'm pretty sure there's a certain amount of scaling and judging demand and load, and I don't think a lot of people jump on it because, especially if they've like limited times you can play it, most people just think I can't be bothered or I'll wait until it comes out. And I think that does it a disservice then because they're not getting the numbers, they can't adapt to it, and then you have a really bad launch day when the servers don't scale fast enough, and people complain.
Gears 5
like,
failed miserably at launch.
Did you play?
I mean, I don't blame the coalition for that, really, to be honest.
And I've seen quite a few unique ways of companies, of developers now trying to avoid that. So there was the Halo route where they just surprise, here it is, out early. A lot of people weren't happy about it because they booked the day off work a week later, and then it's like, oh, here you go, it's out already. Or like some of the other titles where we've seen like a soft launch, so like Grounded was out and there's a beta for so long before it was finally like officially released. And by the time it was officially released, I think most people were like, isn't that the game that's already been out for like 2 years? So
having the beta stress test thing is a big one where I think they even did this for Gears 5 where they said, hey, if you play during these specific times here, you get a unlock for the game. And it was something to encourage people to not just play the beta, but for everyone to go play at a specific time to sort of stress test the servers. It's not going to be anywhere near the amount of people that they have at launch, but at least it gives them that little taste.
Yeah, exactly. I think that is important, and it's a good bit to have in there.
So, Neon or Terry, did you guys have any other thoughts about PvP, I guess?
I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is I just want to hear predictions. I love the fact that we can theorize everything right now and just say, hey, what is this gonna be? What are you thinking? So I'll jump it off and just like rapid fire. What do you think PvP game modes will be? So for me, I think they're gonna pick a lane and they're gonna stick to it. I think one of the biggest issues that we've had, and I'm gonna add clarity, then I'll list mine out, is Gears as a whole. Since probably Gears 3 has had so many playlists that it's like you got competitive, non-competitive, you got all these different modes, and that becomes where populations drop, and then you start to see disgruntled people and blah blah blah. So I'm gonna just name the few modes that I think that are gonna come. I think they're gonna bring in execution. I think Warzone's not gonna be there, so execution, team deathmatch, and Guardian. I think those are going to be your core 3 and maybe something new that we haven't seen.
You don't think King of the Hill or anything?
Not out of the gate. I think they're going to stick in a lane and say we're going to go back to the old ways. So this is how, and I think that's what they're going to do. That's
one objective mode.
Right, yeah.
And the one objective mode is still a killing based. It's a deathmatch based objective mode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they're going to...
Just a quick question, sorry. Do you mean game modes we expect 100% to be that, or game modes that we hope to be that?
What are you thinking? If you were to just say off the cuff, here's what I think would be there. Whether it's your hope or what you think it actually will be?
Okay. TDM, execution, control, because I feel like they've moved away from COF. I'm hoping for escalation, but a bit more closer to 4 than 5s.
Nope.
You're shaking your head.
No.
Let's say Gears 4 escalation was the bomb. 5s was awful. Too much. Too much changed. They made a complicated mode even more complicated. That's not
Yeah.
that's not the route you want to go. Gears 4 escalation, please. Overrun. I'm going to count that in for a PvP. I feel like that's the way it should go. You should have a war-based mode, which is Overrun, hero shooter class base. Everyone has a role for the casuals and the competitive, and then you've got arena. So don't do escape mode and then focus on tile systems. Focus on, you got your arena maps, you've got your Overrun maps, you got a mix of both. Go ham. That's the way it should go.
So I'm kind of
Editor,
with both
please.
of you. I think execution. I think Warzone as like a toggle for private match options and stuff, but not like because that's an easy toggle. But I think execution, TDM, Guardian, and Control. And then I don't know if I expect it. I would. My next choice, if I could choose one, would be to have Overrun in there. I think that would be huge, and then Wingman, which I mean we haven't seen in years, but
I would like that too. Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a hope.
I mean Wingman is what actually. All right, what about Free for All?
Yeah, I do like free for all. It's fun playing it, especially in.
It's a good way for people who are solo and don't want to rely on teammates.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean that, and Gears, if you don't have a good teammate or teammates, you can usually get smacked around fairly easily. You know, with if you're rolling against a stack squad or a few people that are playing together.
Something I will
It
add
certainly
for
seems to have its niche, doesn't it? But it's not really been the Gears way. And again, the focus on brotherhood, it's a team game. But I can see, yeah, that there has been either solo players, queuers, or streamers, or that lot. They wanted the free for all, and they got the mode. I think it was didn't have that much longevity, maybe, but yeah.
I mean, if I hop
I
on
don't know.
Gears right now,
Maybe
I
later.
feel
Maybe
like
it comes later.
Free for All is one of the few modes that I'd be able to find pretty quickly.
They changed it from 14 to 10, didn't they? If I remember correctly.
Did they?
Yeah, it's smaller. Yeah, it's 10 people.
Well, and having maps that were created with free for all in mind, like don't have free for all specific maps. Use your traditional maps for free for all. That's sort of to the point we were talking about earlier, where you don't want to divide and have game type specific maps.
I mean, free for all on normal maps can work, at least from what we've tested on Delta Online, where certain maps are even better. For example, like Sandbar is so huge, it works for free for all. It's great. So with free for all, it makes a lot of maps actually viable, which we've learned in that fun project over there. I think no matter what, if they do have multiple game modes, we need the modern feature, which many games do have, where you can search multiple at once, because being able to search only one at a time.
I think that's the match composer thing, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So it was first introduced in Title 2, which is I've been asking for it since long as that. Bloody hell, that's like 7 years ago now. And Modern Warfare started bringing it up as well, and I know a lot of games have introduced it too. I think it's a modern necessity. That way, don't get me wrong, the popular modes will always still be the popular ones. But instead of never getting a game of execution, you will now and then get a game of execution, as an example. So it definitely does need to be implemented.
So it'd be interesting if they took it up one level and grouped it up. So you had like arena modes, as your execution, your Warzone, and that kind of thing.
So what? So like
action shooter, arcade, overrun. Right, and then you had your objective
don't bring arcade back, please.
I
please
actually
don't
liked
bring
arcade. I don't think they would bring it back, but I liked arcade.
Don't bring it back.
Then you have your objective category, so your control, your King of the Hill, and territory kind of one would be quite interesting as well.
Sort of like Mosh Pit back in COD, where they had the Mosh Pit playlist.
That's what it sounds like. That's what it sounds like.
So Terry, you brought up escalation.
Escalatiana, yeah.
Oh, escalation. Yeah.
So
I think that was quite popular.
So how do people feel about competitive gears? Escalation was made as the premier esports mode for it. I guess I've always been under the mindset of make a good game and people will play that game. They will get good at it. And if it creates a competitive environment, then that will have more longevity than something that is forced.
No, I do agree. My love for escalation, especially with Gears 4, is from back in the day, before crossplay. When we were cursed to the Microsoft store and there was like 10 of us. We all used to play games, we used to play pugs all the time, and it was always escalation with competitive MLG rules, and it was great. Escalation is a mode where when everyone knows what they're doing and you're in a competitive environment, Gears 4 excelled because there was just so much to it that made it fun. When you placed a weapon down, a power weapon, a boom shot was always in the middle. Even though your team was losing, you're risking a drop shot on, I don't know, like a foundation next to statue, because your team always wins up there, so you put it there. But that changes the map dynamic completely because that changes player flow throughout the map. There's always so much back and forth, and whenever you place, like I said, whenever you placed a weapon like a Boltok, yes, you got a Boltok because we had a good Boltok player, but they also have a really good Boltok player. There was a lot to it that made it so good. The problem with it was there was no tutorial for it. There was never a way to explain to new players in pubs how to play it. So a lot of
I made
players
a
played
tutorial.
it. Well, in game there was no tutorial.
No, but I think, like you said, when you're playing with a group of 10 people, 5 on each team, who know what they are doing, it plays wonderfully. But it's that disconnect of you need to be playing at such a high level for that game in order for it to play effectively, or it also highlights any mismatch in skill level between teams.
Yes.
And it makes that much more clear. So when you're playing online, not an organized match, even if people know what they are doing, it's going to feel extremely imbalanced.
No, you are absolutely correct, and that is the problem with the mode. It is so high. The ceiling for it is so high. If the team is slightly off balance by one person, the other team will steamroll them. And we used to have that a lot because we had to balance the teams ourselves all the times. We had an Excel sheet where we started ranking people ourselves, and we put them in our own custom matchmaker by Broadband in the Gears PC server. We tried a lot of things, and so I know exactly what the problems you are mentioning.
Yeah, so I just can't see it making its way into the new game when it's that inaccessible to most players and like just searching public matches.
It was clearly curated specifically for the esports scene, wasn't it? It's a arena shooter mode with a tactical element of it that lends itself very well to commentatory over the top of it and to explain, what the teams are thinking, what they're doing, why they're laying that. And of course, your star players who would always be an absolute devil with the drop shot, it played into that really well. Where it didn't so much is, as you say, in the more casual space with randoms and trying to make that work. It's definitely a ranked mode, a competitive mode, and I don't know whether you take the time to try and build some sort of really in-depth ranking system on meta on top of that, or like clans or something, so you can't play it unless you're in a clan and you've got to get into a clan and set things up. Whether you put those sort of gateways into it to try and make sure that people who play that mode know what they're getting into and are practiced with it. But that takes development time, doesn't it?
That's just gatekeeping, though, and it's development time that could be better spent elsewhere.
Don't you dare! Don't you, Coalition, please. A big fan. Escalation Gears 4, please, thank you. That's all I asked for.
Go ahead, Neon.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, the biggest thing, and I 100% am with you, Chaps. I've said this in like my own things online, like my own streams and stuff that I've been doing, and like basically the biggest thing is who is the coalition going to listen to? Are they going to take their own and advice? Because it felt like Gears 5 was definitely esports heavy.
I mean,
Which is
that
funny
was
because
because
even
of
the esports people
particular.
said that it wasn't.
I know, but
I've heard
the
things. That's all
the
I'll say. I've
optics.
heard things.
It was the optics surrounding it. Like, I
Yeah,
mean,
of
when
course.
you first got the introduction, I think it was East. If going back like what 5 years now, it felt
Yeah,
like
yeah.
esports, and so that's what, whether it was or wasn't, the messaging is what that was.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
there's been a big uproar in competitive gaming, and we could. This is, I don't want to spin this out where it's not where it doesn't need to go, but I think I would love to go back to just a very simple elo system of some kind that felt genuine to, what Gears 2 was. I think that's when it first got implemented, was Gears 2. I would just like something a little bit more simplistic. I don't want to worry about having to reach diamond or masters or platinum or onyx or whatever rankings there are nowadays. I just want to go in and play the game, to your point, Chaps, whether it's with my friends or not with my friends. I want to go in there and have a good match. I don't want it to be where I'm having to sweat bullets like in Call of Duty. Like, you go play any game mode in Call of Duty today, you're going to run into something crazy. And that's not fun. That doesn't make the game fun. And so, to your point, I think that's what hopefully the coalition is going to say is like, okay, let's develop something that's fun. And if it spins out, and it comes popular again. And I think
My
that's what made.
counterpoint,
Yep.
skill issue. Take the L. I'm joking.
I was gonna say, there's if
We're
you
all getting older.
yeah,
Yeah,
well,
we are.
that's why I said there can be a very simple elo system based off like,
Yes, yeah, of course.
whatever algorithms and criteria you want to do, but it doesn't need to be based off whatever they were trying to do with like Gears 5 and somewhat to Gears 4, because then
Yeah.
as the stronger the player you get, the harder and longer it takes to find those matches. So introduce something that still
Yes.
has some competitiveness, but
Yeah.
doesn't mean you win one game, the next game you're getting punished because you just won a game, or you got
Yeah.
the most kills in the lobby or most damage or whatever. And
So
and
do
that's
you
what I'm
mean like
saying.
modern skill-based matchmaking, how it's been implemented?
Yeah, I just think it's too much. I think it's too much. It takes away the
Yeah.
the fun factor. Like, as you said, gamers, that grew up on these type of franchisees are getting older. Yes, there's a brand new influx of people playing, but
Yeah.
like, make it a little bit in that middle area. I don't know what
No.
that solution looks like. I'm not saying completely remove it. I'm just saying make it a little bit more simplistic.
There's always a middle ground. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree. And my love for escalation aside, I'm not one to ignore faults or its flaws. And there is faults and flaws with it. That's why it confused me how they made it more complicated in Gears 5, as I
Yeah.
mentioned before, because that's just like, no, you should be doing the opposite. No, go back. Go back. Tutorial mode, please. And they did learn with the tutorial modes. Gridiron had a brief few screens where it showed you
forgot
how to
about
play
that.
it, and that was great. And that made me question more why we didn't get it for escalation. But I digress. When it comes to the competitive modes for Gears of War, as much as I love escalation, the chances of it coming back the way I want it to be is slim. I think they should focus more on what Halo did and what CDL does with COD, is where you have the more popular mode and you rotate between those modes. So you'll have execution, you'll have control, potentially a bomb mode. Map design philosophy for multiplayer might change completely. Map design for a while now has been all symmetrical. That could change. And asymmetrical maps could introduce a bomb life mode, depending how they adjust the mechanics for cover and such as well. So,
Well,
there's a
speaking of
lot
asymmetrical
there.
modes and things that have no flaws at all with them, you mentioned Overrun earlier.
Hell yeah.
So, Overrun could really work as a multiplayer mode. It would dive deep into this Locust Origins thing, and it's that COG versus Locust thing that people really want. That if they bring back, let's transition a little bit. So we've covered PvP for a little while. If we go over to PvE, I'll say if they bring back Overrun, do they bring back Beast Mode? Because they've put in the controls for controlling the Locust and all their abilities for something like Overrun. Would it be a short putt to bring in Beast Mode?
I just always felt like Overrun was an evolution on Beast Mode,
There's
but
some people who don't like PvP though,
I
and they
can
just
understand that. It's always good to have an expansion on PvE modes, and I would like to see Beast Mode come back if they can. You know, if you can have Horde and Beast with Overrun as their war mode, so to speak. I feel like I'm going off topic a little bit, but I always feel like Gears of War should also expand on looking at more than just 5v5 or 4v4. And I think Overrun's a good way to introduce that with like a war type mode, but I digress.
I
Um,
I don't think Beast is really needed. Like, even if they go through all the effort for
mhm,
Overrun and they get all those
mhm.
Locust abilities and everything in there,
Yeah,
in theory should be a pretty short put to add a Beast mode type thing. I don't know.
in
It's
theory.
in theory, but even that I don't think would be worth the effort to add a Beast mode unless they did some serious changes to it. Because as much as people ask for it because they liked it in Gears 3, it died out immediately and it just didn't have the replay value.
I would like to see it. If it's not a deal breaker for me if it doesn't come.
Depends though.
Uh,
If you're playing if you're playing a Corpser instead of a what are those little centipede, and that
okay,
might
so
be a little bit might last a little bit longer if you actually get to cause chaos and take out
Well,
buildings, because they did mention it's going to be top
there
tier
were Corpsers in
total
Beast.
destruction. Hmm? Oh,
mini
they were. Oh,
corpses. Yeah, mini
I
ones,
didn't
yeah.
go back
Little
and play
baby
it. I forgot.
corpses.
Or wait, were they in Beast or just Overrun? I know they were in
No, no,
Overrun.
no. You had little baby corpses in beast mode.
Okay.
I should know. I test the bloody fan version of it.
Okay.
It's like you have mini
Scaled
corpses.
up
You had the
because they said they're going to
mortarers,
scale everything up. So
armored
scaled
cannons.
up where
Yeah,
you're
Yeah.
destroying like a whole building with a Corpser.
But then PvE Horde mode, right? Like,
Mm.
can you see this game launching without a version of Horde?
no,
Nah.
I can't. No, horde
I
mode was
they're
Nah.
gonna
what
change it. They're
made
gonna.
Gears 2.
I think they're gonna change that. I think they'll have a horde like mode. I truly don't think it's going to be the way that we've been accustomed to it for the last few
I could
years.
definitely see that.
I agree. I agree. I think
I
it
don't
needs an
think
So
evolution.
I think it's
j-
going. I think they need. Sorry, I just was gonna say that I think they need to make this just a little bit more wide scale. It doesn't like. I know we were talking earlier about like maps and stuff like that. I'm not exactly sure what I'm envisioning in my head, but my thoughts
I
are
know.
make it larger scale, not just based off a map, and then you're trying to like set up these strong
Yeah.
points, and then you're there for 50 waves or whatever the case may be. I would like to see it a little bit more evolved, especially given the fact that we're not all the way into like a Gears 5 anymore. We're going
Yeah.
back to day one where things are going crazy. You know what I mean? So I could see them potentially finding a way to make this a little bit larger scale. And I think that would
On
be
that
really cool.
topic,
I
hang
was
on.
think
Oh,
on
sorry.
that I
Go on,
was
Ace.
going to say. Yeah, I was exactly the sort of thing I was going to allude to. So do you remember in the campaign in Gears 4, there's a couple of defend moments that's like horde but within the campaign.
Yeah.
And again, it's quite a larger map. That's the kind of thing I was thinking, and we'd see more of that. Like it's a large area you've got to defend, and that, but it would have all the modern day enhancements. Except I presume you wouldn't have a fabricator, would you, this time? So
No.
you just have to, and you probably scrounge whatever's around the map and area
Remember,
and
Horde
put it
doesn't
together.
need to follow the lore. I don't think they should, but they could have a fabricator.
But,
Sure.
but what if? But what if they do? What if? I posted it just a little earlier. But you got the new Warhammer 40k game, and they have a co-op mode in there, and it's basically co-op missions where you have an objective, and it sort of expands on the story, and you have your own character that you customize. Why can't Gears do that? What if the traditional Horde modes needs to be revamped completely? What if we don't get Overrun or Horde, but we get an expansion to the story through like certain side missions or its own sort of co-op missions where
Oh,
it
I would
sort of
love like
expands.
Spec Ops that I think they had in like Halo 5 or something. One of the Halo games.
Spartan
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 Ops.
Spartan Ops.
stories, Spartan Up story, yeah, like that sort of thing. But
It was kind of like,
like
yeah,
if you haven't seen the Space Marine 2 PvE co-op trailer, have a look at it, because for me, that's what I can see Gears having and succeeding in. We have the gore for it. We've got the enemy variety. We can definitely have the story structure and level design for it. I think that's the best way to sort of expand on PvE, because don't get me wrong, I love Horde, but there's something very monotonous about,
And I think that's
tower
sort of
defense.
what Neon was saying about how they need to expand it, which I think the issue is the current meta is that you set up in a spot and you defend that spot. You're 50 waves in the same location.
Yeah.
I agree that I think they should and they probably will revamp things a little bit.
yeah.
And I think part of that is 4 and 5 Horde was very similar to each other, and I know I personally just got tired of it. It's the same thing over and
Yes.
over again.
Yes.
So the things I could see them doing are, I don't necessarily want them to go back to survival from Judgment, but I thought that actually worked out pretty well, where it's just a one-sided overrun, where you're defending. They can intentionally make the enemies a little bit stronger because the intention is you're holding off one area, you are going to get overrun and lose that area, and you have to fall back and defend a different area. And there's 3 phases. I mean, you could hold them off on the first phase if you're good enough, but there are those multiple phases that you end up going through, and you get to see the different parts of the map, and you have different strategies for different parts of the map. Maybe you need to change your class, and you switch to a different class for a different part of the map. So that was one thing. Or if you picture like Flood from Gears 2, remember that map where the emulsion ends up coming up and changing the dynamic of what's available on the map? Doing something like that, or even in the theme of E-Day, using hammer strikes to like pin off parts of the map. Every so many like maybe it's after every boss wave, something happens, and like the part of the map that was most populated for those previous 10 waves is now hit by a hammer strike, and it is off limits, and you have to go set up in a different part of the map. It's something that forces you to move. There's a lot of people who won't like that because it's changing from your camping and setting up a nice base and defending it that they've gotten used to in the past few games. But it is something that could help that monotony.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. The progression and evolution of Horde, we've seen the implementation of fortifications, and they were set, and then you could
like Gears 3, where they were set fortifications,
and then you could move them in 4, and then in 5, you had the fabricating forward in 5.
5 they just expanded it.
They just expanded it again, didn't they?
They take the classes.
So I think what you're saying is, I think the next thing to move will be the entire base. Like you said, there will be an E-hole opens up, or there's a hammer strike or something, and you have to keep moving. And I think honestly, that's probably the next thing. But it depends how they can do that with the scope and the size of the maps. But they have said total destruction. So I think that would be a nice way to expand on it. I don't think you're going to get rid of Horde and the 50 waves, because that is the core of it, and people will probably be quite upset if you detour too much from that. But something like, now you've got to rebuild your base, now you've got to move it, and to be fair, a good matriarch in 5 would probably wipe out your base more than a few times, so you'd have to rebuild anyway.
So I know a lot of people have asked for Gears 2 Horde.
Yeah, and I think survival and scrambling to get to a new area and sort of quickly find what you can in the rooms and things, and sort of scavenge. So a bit like like your Fortnite things and that lot. You go into a new area, and then you've got to scavenge for your weapons and ammo and bits and things, and sort of get prepared. If there isn't the fabricator to just give yourself more ammo and new weapons again. If you've actually got to run in a room and decide, right, you take the sniper, you take that, see what you've got and put together. But it depends. It depends. If it's Horde has never really clung on too much onto the story aspect, but the other PvE mode that they have in is usually tied more in with the lore and the setting, so it could be something more for that. And Horde maybe just stays as the kind of familiar staples, so that there's always something there that people, oh yeah, I've played that before, I know how that goes, and gets into it. Some bit of familiarity there.
I
I
think
just
that if
feel like sorry, sorry, Chops, carry on. Sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I just feel like PvE modes have just we've gone past that sort of gameplay. Even with something like Ghost of Tsushima, which has a horde style gameplay, even that has raids. Uh, Destiny PvE has expanded, games in a way that, you can't just sit in one room and just kill enemies over. I just think like it has to change because the times have changed. And don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, I still like Horde, but I think there's ways they should expand on it, and there's ways that the industry have expanded on it that they should look at.
Yeah,
I just like,
I never
yeah, carry
played
on, sorry.
Destiny 2, but I played the crap out of Destiny 1, and
A man the
I
taste.
I don't remember what it was called. It was like the chamber of something where you went to different rooms to like each time you completed something you had to go to a different room and defeat that boss or defeat that wave of enemies. And then you maybe go back to a different room and it resets and it's some new challenge. And it was something that changed up every time. You had to change the way that you played. That would be cool, but I think for me, I've heard a lot of people say they like Gears 2 Horde and how simple it was. And I think one of the big roots of that is in the sentries and turrets and stuff that we have in the later games. So I would almost argue that the next evolution for Horde in my mind would be maybe something that causes you to change up location, but probably sticking with the class system where you can have different classes that have different specialties. But for fortifications, have defensive only. Maybe some decoys and a couple levels of fences.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to think if there's any other defensive things, but you can use some fortifications to help protect you. And maybe a stricter budget so you don't just go overload with putting fences everywhere and make all the enemies just slow to a crawl. But something that helps you defend a little bit, and then you have to do all the work rather than sitting back and repairing stuff. I I think that would be a nice sort of next evolution or next stepping stone for Horde, is bringing it back to
I
the
guess
basics a lot.
my question there is, do you think the drones in Horde will be scaled to match your characters, or do you think they'll be scaled to match the campaign? Because if they're scaled to match the campaign, even a couple of turrets going full whack at them is probably only going to slow their approach.
Didn't Gears 3 have campaign? I swear Gears 3 used the campaign models for Horde. And it was only when you used PvP, it had a separate model for
Yeah,
the size. And I think with Gears 5, it was just all normal size
Yes,
because
but
they only
in
had the multiplayer model.
yeah, but they're saying they're going to scale them up, aren't they? The drones look a lot larger and
yeah.
more imposing.
They
So
are
I'm guessing
taller,
these,
aren't they? Yeah.
yeah, so I'm guessing this is the first wave of like really beefy, their best fighters that presumably die out as the game series go on. Mind you, you would have thought the Lambent would have taken out a few of them, but I suppose I'm not quite sure how long they were fighting the Lambent for. But obviously, three mainline or four mainline games of Gears the COG have dwindled down their numbers to just their more scrawnier drones
Yeah.
by the time they're at the end. But yeah, so these ones are much more stronger. So yeah, it, it might make sense in lore that even turrets and things kind of slow them down, especially with their armor and everything, and not sort of cut them to Swiss cheese as they do later on. But who knows? Yeah, I think it depends what they're going to do, because they with having to do a prequel, then you do have the slight problem of, right, all these things we've added into Horde now. Do we have them? Do we not have them? Do we have the fabricator? Do we not have the fabricator? Do we have like the I mean, you can't. The modern turrets look very much in the DB style, don't they? So it wouldn't be that, would
I
it? It'd be the
I
older
honestly
ones.
don't think that's going to be an issue for them. Like maybe they'll try and keep it centered around the lore, But when it comes to things outside of the campaign, I think they can just open up Pandora's box, whatever they want to do.
Be nice to see the old turrets back again.
All
They
right.
could.
Indeed.
So we've been going for, it's almost been 2 hours now.
Jesus.
I'll give some time for closing comments here in a little bit, but I got one last big thing we need to talk about, and that is timing, release. As of a couple hours ago, there's some news coming out that from Tom Warren saying that he thinks he remembers hearing that it's going to be 2025 for a release. I know there's been speculation of a 2026 release to coincide with the 20th anniversary of Gears 1.
That was my speculation on Twitter. I don't know if that's the case, but it was just more of a fan because I was thinking back to a lot of the trailers and interviews leading up to Gears 1, the original. And every time they ask, oh, when's it come out? They would always say, oh, E-Day 2006. What is E-Day? Oh, E-Day 2006. So it was a fun little connection, and it does make sense.
You also have in the showcase, there were a lot of things that were announced for later this year or 2024, or things that were announced as 2025. But then there were some games, like E-Day, that did not specify any release window at all. And if it was 2025, would they have said that in the showcase? I think. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I don't think they're gonna put a time frame out there. I mean, and I don't necessarily think it has anything to do with celebrating the 20-year launch of the franchise. I think what really Microsoft's strategy comes down to now is literally they have a bunch of studios and they have a lot of games, and most of them are going to Game Pass. So you don't want to unload all of your big titles at similar times, especially now with having the biggest successful franchise, Call of Duty, which, a lot of times back in the past, this is not uncommon. I think Judgment actually changed the game a little bit and came out in like April or May, where Call of
Typically
Duty
it's fall.
Right. But the point what I was getting at is like Call of Duty would come out in the fall, but guess what also was coming out? Microsoft's big hitter, which was Halo or Gears of War. So you were competing against each other. Now Microsoft says, you know what? I have the cards to the table. I can play the deck however I want. I think that they could really do whatever they want with the release date of this game based off what their project pipelines and what other games are looking like. I don't think they want to pit though two big premier franchises, Call of Duty and Gears of War, at the same time, because Call of Duty is most likely going to have another game coming out in that October-November timeframe. I don't think it makes any sense, unfortunately for Gears, to release at that same time frame, whether it's 2025 or 2026. That was at November timeframe. I don't think it makes any sense from a business model of Game Pass, personally, first and foremost, assuming that's the model we're going to continue to go down. But then to compete with your other large competitor game, which has a yearly or annual release.
Yeah, I think my biggest hope is that they didn't put a release date on it because they honestly don't know when it will be ready, and they want to take their time and polish this game, which the past few games have lacked, is a decent amount of polish and completeness before launch. They want to put in the time and do this right rather than setting a date, holding themselves to it, and not having the time to properly polish the game and get things in the correct state.
Yeah, I'd agree. I don't think they'd want to put their flag down on anything just yet. As long as either the game launches or if it does manage to get out earlier, that there's perhaps a collection of skins or something celebratory in game to mark the event, that'd be good. Or if it does take a little bit longer to cook, they could always launch the beta on that date, and start gaining
There's
information
no
on
way
that.
the beta's on the 20th anniversary. That would put the game so far out, right?
You'd be looking at
Not
2027
necessarily.
then,
Only
wouldn't
like
you?
a couple of
What would be really
months,
interesting?
isn't it?
Well, you're talking 2026 at that point. I think what would, if Tom Warren's rumors or speculation is accurate, I could see something very crazy where they have been working on this for quite some time. You know, they've been in the Unreal Engine 5 with the Matrix demo and doing some other an unannounced name that got scrapped. Maybe Gears E-Day has been in production longer than we thought, but to that point, there could be that team that was working on again, just bunch of speculation thinking
Yeah.
like maybe that team that was working on that unannounced game says, you know what, hey, now we're working on some DLC for the 20-year anniversary of the franchise. So main game comes out on, that whatever time they want in 2025, and then on that specific date there's another tie-in to Gears while they're still working on Gear 6, whatever that might be. I'm not saying it's Gear 6, I'm saying it's like a DLC expansion like Rom Shadow or something like that to E-Day to continue to further the story while they're still baking up Gear 6.
Yeah.
I think that just makes a lot of sense because given the 20-year anniversary should be truly about Gears 1 in particular and the celebration of the franchise. I think that would just be perfect logic. Again, that's if they go down that route. But I think that would be a huge win for the franchise instead of just giving out skins, for example. I think it's a good idea because they did that with the 15th year anniversary or whatever it was, and that was cool. But I don't think it really pays enough attention to a very successful franchise for Microsoft overall.
Yep. All right.
But like you said, we'll hope it is there and ready when it comes out. I mean,
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the
I
prayer.
don't know where developers are and publishers are, but in the past, the sort of desire to rush something out the door just to hit an anniversary date has probably not paid off long term, and taking a little bit longer to let it cook and have a much better first impression probably leads to a better long term sustainability of the player base and the community.
I can't see them.
Even if it does mean making everyone sort of, you know, bite their nails for a bit longer and I think the general sort of those kind of grumbles, it's delayed, it's late, oh, it's taking longer. You never remember them afterwards.
I
But if
can't
it is
see them
rushed out
delaying
earlier,
past
that is
November
remembered.
2026. November 2026 is like I can't see it coming out after that.
No, I think that's the
Yeah, probably
latest
not.
they will bring it out.
Yeah.
I reckon realistically, early 2026. That is my
Yeah.
realistic guess. My first speculation was just more for fun, but I think that's internally the latest. Because,
Yeah.
you don't want to miss the 20th.
I mean,
Right.
looking
If
over the
anything, that's the
history of the
start.
games, they have previously sort of been 2, maybe 3 year gaps between them. So
Well,
assuming they've already
the
been
game
working on
industry
it
has
for,
changed, right?
It's
yeah,
games
that
take
is the thing.
longer.
It is a bigger deal now.
Yeah. All right.
Games
So we've
just
been
take
going for
longer.
around 2 hours now. Let's go around the room again. We'll go reverse order this time for just closing comments. Any last things you want to add? You can also add or tell people where they can find you. And by the way, I'll have links to whatever Discord or YouTube or Twitch or whatever you want down in the description of this video. But let's wrap it up and go back around the room. So Ace, we'll cycle back to you.
All right. I'm really excited. I'm glad to see the setting they've gone for. I think this should excite old players and new players. And I believe the theme of brotherhood is very important in this time of the industry as well. And it's something everyone can rally around, I think. And I hope the community takes that on board. And if there are a few little mistakes or little errors here or there, or things that are not perhaps quite perfect at launch, that they give constructive criticism and are as diplomatic with it as they can be, rather than perhaps some of the negativity we saw in the past. But at least it looks like everyone's probably going in the same direction. So I'm hoping things will be a lot smoother this time than before. Yeah, so you can catch me on X, formerly Twitter, Discord as well, in the official Discord. Yeah, send me a message or DM or whatever if you've got any questions, and I'll try and help you out with whatever. And thanks very much for having me here. I appreciate it. It's always great to chat with the likes of BChaps, Neon, and Terry. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for joining. So, Terry, what do you got for us?
I'm excited to see how they cover E-Day in the games. Besides the Gears 4 prologue, which I actually just briefly brought up near the end there because I sort of wanted to see how they handle that there. But no, I'm very excited to see story-wise. There's so much they can cover in that time period. I mean, it's 14 years before Gears 1, after E-Day. So there's a lot they can cover, and there's multiple games they could potentially cover as well. Who knows? They might not even ever go to Gears 6 as soon as we think, depending how E-Day does. But
Yeah.
no, I'm very excited to see how they not only return the game back to sort of its form, its original state in terms of atmosphere, but also how they evolve it. Will we get shoulder swapping? Will we get asymmetrical maps more often? Will they expand upon the PvE sections? Will we get an editor? Sort of those things. Mod support, please. But no, very excited. And, if anyone ever wants to play the best version of Gears 1 with an editor and custom maps, we play every Saturday in the Gears PC Discord, and you're more than welcome to join us. We will help you install Gears 1 and install the custom maps. It's very easy. And hopefully, we'll also host UE nights again soon. And you'll also get up-to-date news on Delta Online and New Hope, which is Gears 1 and 3 projects for PC by the fans. So keep an eye out on that because it's very exciting.
It is crazy work that you guys... I haven't actually played it myself, but I've seen the videos and pictures of what you guys have done.
I don't know if they want to be mentioned here because of sake of privacy, but it's not me. I just help test and give feedback. The rest of them are incredible people, and we do apologize. It's taken a while, but keep in mind it's all in people's spare time. So it's a hobby, so
Yep.
It's full of love. Let's just say that.
Yes, Gears fam. #.
Exactly.
All right, Neon?
I will not go long. I'm going to keep it very straightforward. I will say that there's a few things that I'm very excited about. One is that Gears is pulling numbers in by viewership, with YouTube and things of that nature. So it's great to see that the franchise, even though everybody's been saying it's dead, or like I've said, like PvE was dead. I never said Gears was dead. I made a video about that. But all that to say, it's good to know that this franchise still has that kick to it many years later. So it's great to know that. Secondly, I think everybody in the world was probably surprised that we actually went to E-Day. I think everybody was expecting Gears 6 or a Gears collection, which everybody has had different opinions on. So I think it's great that they said they threw a curveball at everybody and said, you're all wrong. Look at it. Watch us cook. And they did. And I think it's amazing. So I'm just excited to know that the community's actually got something to really to circle back on and on what the conversations, and people are playing old games, and it's just great to see it all. So it's been a great pleasure being able to talk Gears again. It's been a few years since I've done that, and I hope to do it more. Twitter, live streams on Twitch or whatever. I'm there. This is the game that I think unites a lot of people to that brotherhood statement that the coalition pushes, but also in this particular video that Ace has been pushing.
Yep. All right. Well, I'm with you guys. I'm super excited for all of this. I'm also very interested in the release schedule for news. Are they going to go dark again for a little while? When are they going to get that hype train really rolling? Because this was just a teaser. And sort of in that spirit, I will remind people, like I did before the showcase and everything, make sure you check and see if things are officially announced. There's going to be a lot of speculation and a lot of hype and a lot of rumors. But before you trust something as fact, just try and confirm it. It's going to be a really fun time to be a Gears fan leading up to this, but just make sure you separate fact from rumors. All right. That does it. We are, I think, slightly over 2 hours now. So this was I think I said we're going to target an hour, and we'll end up going for 2. So good job. I want to thank Terry first of all for tagging me on Twitter and saying, "Hey, do you guys want to chat again?" And then also Ace and Neon for joining as well. I don't know when the next stream like this, or this isn't even a stream. Sometimes we stream it, sometimes we record it. I don't know when the next panel thing will be. I always enjoy doing them, and I look forward to talking with you guys, either the 3 of us, or 3 of you in here, or anyone watching this who wants to join one in the future. Look forward to chatting with you in the future. So, see ya.